Here is a question nobody ever asks. How does a country buy half a continent? The United States did it for about 3 cents an acre. It was mocked for it. Then, 64 years later, it did it again. 2 cents an acre this time, signed at 4 in the morning by candlelight, in the middle of a card game. This is the story of the map itself. A map built by a slave revolt in Haiti, by gold discovered 9 days too late, by a fired diplomat who bought the American West anyway, and by a war that nearly started over a pig. 13 colonies became 50 states, by purchase, by treaty, by loophole, and by force. Every line on this map has a story. This is how America was built. 1783, Paris. Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, and John Jay sit down to negotiate peace with Britain, under strict orders to do nothing without France, their ally. They ignore the orders. They cut a secret side deal, and Franklin opens by asking for Canada. He doesn't get it. But Britain, desperate to pull America away from France, hands over something staggering, everything to the Mississippi River. Overnight, the new nation nearly doubles, close to 900,000 square miles, for free. Not a shilling changes hands. America's first great land windfall comes from disobeying instructions and outplaying its own ally at the table. But buried inside that windfall is a question. What exactly do you do with all that land? Here's the answer. And it may be the most important idea in this entire story. In 1787, before the Constitution is even finished, Congress passes the Northwest Ordinance. Every empire in history had treated new land the same way, as colonies, subjects, second class. The ordinance does something no empire had ever done. It says that when a territory reaches 60,000 people, it writes a constitution and enters the Union as a full equal of the original states. Not a colony, a partner. That single mechanism is the engine of everything that follows. It is why this map could keep growing for the next 172 years. The ordinance also bans slavery across the territory, the first federal limit on its expansion. The machine is built, it just needs land. And in 1803, it gets an ocean of it. It begins with a disaster on a Caribbean island. Napoleon dreams of an American empire, but in Haiti, a revolution of the enslaved and an epidemic of yellow fever annihilate the army he sends to secure it. His dream dies. Now he needs cash for war with Britain. So when 2 Americans, Livingston and Monroe, arrive in Paris, authorized to spend $10 million on the city of New Orleans, France offers them everything. 828,000 square miles, $15 million, less than 3 cents an acre. They have no way to consult Washington. A letter takes weeks by ship, so they sign anyway, wildly beyond their authority. When Livingston asks where the borders actually are, the French minister shrugs. You have made a noble bargain. I suppose you will make the most of it. The United States has just doubled in size overnight, and its own president isn't sure it was legal. Jefferson privately admits the Constitution gives him no clear power to buy territory. He drafts an amendment to fix it, then quietly shelves it and rams the treaty through before Napoleon can change his mind. He sends Lewis and Clark into land no American has ever mapped. And here are 2 truths the textbooks skip. First, the purchase was financed through British and Dutch banks, and by the time the last bond was paid off in 1823, the real cost was over $27 million, nearly double the sticker price. Second, France didn't actually control most of that land. Native nations did. Napoleon sold America a claim, and the land itself would be taken piece by piece over the next century. Florida falls because one general goes rogue. 1818. Andrew Jackson storms into Spanish territory, chasing Seminole fighters, seizes Spanish forts, and executes 2 British subjects after drumhead trials, nearly triggering war with 2 empires at once. But Secretary of State John Quincy Adams refuses to apologize. Instead, he turns the outrage into an ultimatum: police Florida or sell it. In 1819, Spain gives it up, 46 million acres, and not $1 goes to Madrid. America simply assumes $5 million of its own citizens' claims. But watch this man, Jackson. 11 years after Spain signs, as president, he signs the Indian Removal Act. The Cherokee win at the Supreme Court, and his government ignores the ruling. On the Trail of Tears, of some 16,000 Cherokee removed, an estimated 4,000 die. The map grows, and someone always pays. For 9 years, Texas is a country. Its own navy, its own currency. Ambassadors in London and Paris, the London embassy sits above a wine shop, and the plaque is still there today. Texas wants to join the Union, but the annexation treaty is crushed in the Senate. Treaties need a 2/3 vote. So in 1845, Congress invents a loophole, a joint resolution needing only a simple majority. The Senate deadlocks, 26 to 26. Then a single senator, Henry Johnson of Louisiana, switches his vote, 27 to 25. Texas enters the Union with 249 million acres for free. But there's a price. Mexico never recognized Texan independence. War is now all but guaranteed. And remember this trick, the simple majority resolution. America will use it again on a kingdom in the Pacific. Meanwhile, in the Northwest, expansionists are chanting a rallying cry, 54-40 or fight, demanding land all the way up to Russian Alaska. President Polk faces a choice: war with Britain and Mexico at the same time, or compromise. He quietly folds at the 49th parallel. The Oregon Treaty of 1846 hands America 183 million acres, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and beyond, without a shot fired or a dollar paid. But the treaty's sloppy island wording leaves a fuse burning. 13 years later, an American farmer on San Juan Island shoots a British pig, and within weeks, 461 American soldiers face 5 Royal Navy warships carrying more than 2,000 men. It takes 13 more years and arbitration by the Kaiser of Germany to settle it. Total casualties of the Pig War, 1 pig. The Mexican-American War is brutal, lopsided, and questioned even by the men who fight it. Ulysses S. Grant later calls it one of the most unjust wars ever waged by a stronger nation against the weaker one. Of roughly 13,000 American dead, fewer than 2,000 fall in combat. 7 of every 8 are killed by disease. By late 1847, American troops occupy Mexico City itself. And then comes the strangest hero in this story, Nicholas Trist, the American negotiator. Polk fires him mid-negotiation. Trist reads the recall letter and decides peace matters more than his career. With no job and no authority, he keeps negotiating and signs the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo anyway. Polk is furious, but the treaty delivers everything he wanted, so he has to accept it. Trist is fired, denied even his back pay. Congress finally repays him 23 years later. Look at what that treaty hands over. 525,000 square miles. California, Nevada, Utah, most of Arizona and more for $15 million plus claims. Counting Texas, Mexico has lost over half its territory in barely a decade. And now, the cruelest timing in American history. Gold is struck at Sutter's Mill on January 24, 1848, 9 days before the treaty is signed. Neither side knows. Within months, the gold rush erupts on land Mexico just sold, and within 2 years, the gold coming out of the ground repays the purchase price many times over. And it never stops. California grows so fast it skips the territorial stage entirely, leaping straight to statehood in 1850. 5 years on, Santa Ana sells one final strip, the Gadsden Purchase, $10 million for a railroad route. It completes the lower 48 and helps cost him his country. Then the map turns on itself. 1861. 11 states try to leave. And in the middle of civil war, the strangest state of all is born. When Virginia secedes from the Union, its western counties secede from Virginia. Lincoln's own cabinet splits exactly 3-3 on whether that is even constitutional. Lincoln signs anyway, noting there is a difference between secession against the Constitution and secession in favor of it. West Virginia, 1863. The only state ever carved from a Confederate state in wartime. A year later, Nevada is rushed in just before the election, its entire state constitution telegraphed to Washington, one of the longest and costliest telegrams ever sent. The Union fights a war to prove the map cannot be torn apart, while quietly redrawing it. After the war, the railroads stitch the continent together, and the interior fills with stars. 1889, North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, and Washington, all in a single year. President Harrison shuffles the papers while signing, so that no one will ever know whether North or South Dakota came first. But there is a darker ledger beneath the homesteads. Between 1778 and 1871, the United States signs nearly 370 ratified treaties with native nations. And historians note that essentially every one is broken, violated, or rewritten. Even Indian Territory, the land promised forever to the nations marched west on the Trail of Tears, is thrown open to land runs, and in 1907 it becomes the state of Oklahoma. The frontier doesn't close gently, it closes on someone. March 29, 1867, evening. Secretary of State William Seward is playing cards when the Russian minister interrupts. The Tsar will sell Alaska. Seward's reply: why wait until tomorrow? They negotiate through the night by candlelight and sign at 4 in the morning. $7.2 million for 375 million acres. 2 cents an acre, one signature, and the United States grows by nearly 20%. Critics sneer at Seward's folly and his polar bear garden, though in truth, most of the press approves. Then gold, the Klondike stampede, pours through Alaska, and Nome's beaches turn out to be laced with it. Then Prudhoe Bay, hundreds of billions of dollars in oil. Asked late in life to name his greatest achievement, Seward answers, the purchase of Alaska. But it will take the people a generation to find it out. Hawaii is not purchased, it is taken. January 17, 1893, 13 men, planters, lawyers, sugar barons, most of them American, overthrow Queen Liliuokalani, backed by more than 160 US Marines and sailors landed from a warship. The Queen yields under protest to avoid bloodshed. President Cleveland investigates, calls it an act of war against a friendly nation, and refuses annexation. So the businessmen simply wait him out. 21,000 native Hawaiians, a majority of the native population, sign petitions against annexation, and they win. The treaty dies in the Senate. Then war with Spain makes Pearl Harbor urgent, and in 1898, Congress reaches for the Texas trick, a joint resolution, simple majority. Hawaii is annexed anyway. It takes the United States 100 years to formally apologize. By 1900, the lower 48 is drawn, but not finished. 2 territories wait at the door. New Mexico waits 62 years as a territory, Arizona nearly 50, blocked by sparse population, and by open prejudice against New Mexico's Spanish-speaking Catholic majority. Congress even tries to force them in as one combined state. Arizona's voters refuse. Then President Taft vetoes Arizona's constitution because it lets voters recall judges. Arizona deletes the clause, wins statehood in February 1912, and promptly votes the recall provision right back in. New Mexico makes 47. Arizona, admitted on Valentine's Day, makes 48. The continental map is complete. And then, nothing. For 47 years, the flag freezes at 48 stars, because the last 2 candidates are separated from the mainland by ocean and by prejudice. 1959. Alaska in January. Hawaii in August, after 94% of its voters say yes. 50 stars. The winning flag design comes from a 17-year-old Ohio student named Bob Heft, who, by his own account, sewed it for a class project and got a B-. Now step back and look at the finished map. Some of it was bought, half a continent for roughly $55 million, paid to empires, almost none of it to the people living on the land, which came instead through nearly 370 treaties, most of them broken. Some was fought for, some was stolen, some asked to join. And here is the thought to leave with. The map we treat as eternal was only finished within living memory. There are people alive today older than the 50-star flag. If history like this reframes how you see the world, subscribe. There's more where this came from.